So let's go back to the expert knowledge and look at XP3020, because that's really what I wanted to talk to you tonight about. But I did want to give you some ideas about how you can incorporate the knowledge that hopefully you'll gain tonight from me and build it into your business. Understanding pet food ingredients. I said to you when I set around about designing XP3020 and formulating it, I went back to everything I knew about what the requirements on dogs are. And dogs do better on meat. That's what they do better on. You feed a dog meat protein and you feed it high quality animal fat and you feed it high quality vitamin minerals, the dog will thrive. And that's what makes the difference. And this is what XP3020 is. We have a single source protein chicken meal, the best carbohydrate source that you can get, which is brown rice. And if you think about when over the years, vets, you take a dog to a vet and he gets a little bit of a dietary upset or a bit of a tummy upset. Many vets have recommended chicken and rice diet. Put him on a chicken and rice diet because it's very, very easily digestible. Rice is such a good, high quality carbohydrate. Chicken is such a great protein source. That's what really XP3020 is, and that's why it works so well. It is chicken meal, brown rice, chicken fat. The potato starch is in there to help us get a bind. Plain potato or sweet potato? It's potato. And there's a difference because potato and sweet potato are actually different. They're not related. They come from a different family. Okay. Yeah. But in this food, the only reason the potato starch is in this, when I went back and did the research, and when I spoke with making this food, the first thing they said to me is, it's not going to make into a kibble. I said, why not? There's too much meat in it. Formulation is it's too much meat. It will not bind into a kibble. And I went back and did my research and I thought, I don't understand this. This is crazy. But when Paul, who started the company and he was originally a salesperson in pet food and he used to sell pet food to the mink ranchers. That's what he sold. He sold mink food. And one day he was at the mink ranch and he looked at this dog, came up to him and the dog looked fabulous. And he said to the guy who ran the mink ranch, he said, Jesus, your dog looks bloody terrific. What does it eat? He said, it eats the mink food. Minks are very closely related to cats. They're obligatory carnivores. They need a lot of meat in their diet. And this dog was eating that. So it started Paul thinking about it and he thought, that's interesting. So he did his research. So he started making, but guess what the first was? It was powder. It had so much meat in it, it wouldn't form into a kibble. It was actually a powdered form. And he used to sell it as a powder. He used to sell it to the puppy farmers. The Midwest of America had lots and lots of puppy farmers, and that's where he used to sell the food to. But it was a powdered form because it had too much meat in it. And that's why when I went to and said this isn't going to form into a kibble because there's too much meat in it. So we tweaked the formula. We put some potato starch. Potato starch actually helps it to formulate into a kibble. We didn't take any meat out to do it. We actually added a little bit of potato starch. So it's got, when you look at the formulation, 37% chicken meal. It's actually a little bit more than that, but I'm not going to give you the exact formula. I don't want you guys going out and making XP3021. But anyway, but this in rough terms is pretty much our formula. 37% chicken meal, 25% brown rice, 15% chicken fat. Now you probably think, how come we've got 15% chicken fat when it's a 30-20 product? Because the chicken meal actually has some fat in it. So it's not just protein, it's protein and fat. So some of that comes back down into the fat to build it up to 20. But in round terms, this is what you've got. Potato starch, beet pulp. Beet pulp is a fabulous fibre source. It provides nutrition to the lining of the gut and it maintains a healthy gut, vitamins and minerals, etc. Now, it comes up to 90%. That's because in round terms there's about 8 to 10% water even in a dry food. Even though it looks dry, it still has a little bit of moisture. But the reason I put that up there is so that I can show you the games that some manufacturers play. That's what a pet food should look like when you're making it properly. It should be, the protein should come from meat, because dogs do best on meat. The fat should come from animal fat, and chicken fat is the best. It has a lower melting point. It actually assimilates into the body and is more digestible. And brown rice is a high quality carbohydrate. Interesting enough, while I'm talking about carbohydrates, do you know that there's that carbohydrate's not a requirement for dogs? If you look at AFCO nutrient profiles, they need protein, they need fat, they need vitamins and minerals. They don't need carbohydrate. It is not a requirement for the dog. But there isn't a dog food in the world that doesn't have carbohydrate. Do you know why it's in there? Close. It's actually, carbohydrate is a good source of energy and a cheap source of energy. And just remember the cheap source of energy. Because you could put chicken fat in there and make it up in total energy, but it'll be a very expensive dog food. And at the end of the day, you have to formulate a food that gives the dog all of the nutrition that it needs, but still in an affordable manner. There's no point making a dog food that's $5 million a kilogram if people can't afford to feed it. But carbohydrate is not actually an essential nutrient for dogs, but there isn't a dog food in the world that doesn't have carbohydrate in it. But talking about the games that pet food manufacturers play, some of them will want to make more money, but at the expense of you and your customers, because they don't care. They're just in it for the money. They're not in it for the dog nutrition. They'll tell you they are, and they'll tell you how wonderful their food is, and they'll tell you how great it is. But let's look what happens. This is the games that some pet foods play. This is a formulation. Chicken. Chicken meal, brown rice, chicken fat, corn gluten, potato starch, beet pulp. Sounds like XP3020, doesn't it? And they'll tell you, hey, look at this, mate. Fresh chicken. Isn't that good? That's got to be better than chicken meal. Fresh chicken. You know why it's in there? I'll tell you why it's in there. 80% water. You can put it at the top of the list by putting actually less protein. There's only, out of that, there's 4% protein comes from the fresh chicken. And fresh chicken isn't any better a protein than chicken meal. It's all the same thing. Chicken meal is the fresh chicken ground down, made into a meal. Still retains all of the quality protein in it. So they then put 20% brown rice, chicken fat 15%, corn gluten. What do you reckon that's in there for? Protein. Corn gluten is protein. There's a number of cereal proteins. Corn gluten, you see it's soy protein. They sometimes call it vegetable protein isolate, vegetable protein concentrate. They even now doing it in some of the grain-free foods where they call that pea concentrate, pea protein concentrate. It's in there for its protein. So let's compare the two. The first food is 30% protein, 25% carb, 20% fat. Second food, 30% protein, 27% carb, 20% fat. What's the difference? XP3020, the protein comes from meat. The other food, the protein comes from meat and cereal. What's the problem with that? Well, I'll tell you what the problem is. Dogs don't eat protein for protein itself. They eat what they eat, and what they need the protein for is the amino acids that make up the protein. There's 23 amino acids. Of those 23 amino acids, 12 are essential amino acids. The remainder are non-essential. Now, what that means is an essential amino acid must be supplied in the diet. If it's not supplied in the diet, the dog goes without. A non-essential amino acid does not have to be supplied in the diet as long as there is sufficient essential amino acids. Because what the dog does is it takes the essential amino acids, it breaks them down into their base parts, it reassembles them into non-essential. That's why one's called essential, one's called non-essential. And guess what the essential amino acids do? They're the ones that keep the muscle tone, skin and coat. They're the ones that keep the vitality of the dog. If you don't supply it in the diet, it goes without. Meat has a complete amino acid profile. Cereal is deficient. Cereal proteins do not have all of the essential amino acids that the dog requires. So if you start getting foods that substitute meat and put carbohydrate in there, or carbohydrate or grain or cereal-based proteins in their place, they will immediately lack the essential amino acids that the dog needs. And that's what ends up happening. XP3020, protein comes from meat, contains all the essential amino acids. The fats provided by chicken fat contains omega-6, omega-3 fatty acids, and it has all of the essential fatty acids, which is maintains your healthy skin and coat. And while we're talking about fat, it's interesting to note that when dogs eat, they preferentially use fat for their energy. Unlike people where, and this is where you have to separate human nutrition from dog nutrition, we try to move away from fat, but dogs should be eating plenty of fat because it's the very first thing that their body looks for in a food to supply their energy. And that's why dogs eat. They eat basically to supply their energy need. And if you don't supply enough fat in the diet, guess what happens? The dog is deficient in his energy, so he then goes to the protein, which is the next thing he looks for, and he breaks that down into energy. And once you use it for energy, it's unavailable for the things that protein should be, which is muscle repair, skin and coat, etc. Which is why when you see dogs that lack fat in their diet, what's the first thing you notice? A dull, lifeless coat? Because the very first thing, the biggest organ in the dog's body is its skin and coat, and the very first thing that gets denied protein when there's a protein deficiency is the skin and coat. That's why when you see a dog in poor condition, you can almost assuredly know that it's either lacking in protein, but most likely lacking in energy. In other words, it's not getting enough fat in its diet. And the carbohydrate in XP3020 comes from brown rice. Excellent source of carbohydrate and recommended by many vets in cases of digestive upsets. It's a high quality carbohydrate. But guess what about brown rice? It's bloody expensive. I could have formulated XP3020 probably about $2 a bag cheaper if I put corn in it instead of rice. Why did I choose rice? Because it's a better carbohydrate. And this food wasn't all about what can we make cheap. This was about making the best food. And you know why it's the best food? Because I feed it to my dog. And the reason I feed it to my dog is because it's the best food. And that's why I made it the best. I wasn't going to feed my dog second best, and I wasn't going to formulate a food which I'd sell to friends of mine if I wasn't prepared to feed it to my dog. And it's interesting, when you think about XP3020, this is the only food on the market that is for all life stages. And you know that that's the true test of a food? True test of a food is you should be able to take the one food, and if you've got a bitch who you're planning to have puppies with, you should be able to put her onto that food. You should be able to mate her. She should carry the pups through gestation. She should be able to whelp those puppies. You should be able to feed those puppies, and then you wean the puppies, and all you've had to do is to increase the amount of food that she will require over that time. You do not have to supplement. If you have to supplement a food at any point in time for any reason, the food's not good enough. It's that simple. And there are many foods out there, you talk to breeders, they get their bitches in whelp and they'll feed something extra, they'll give it something extra. That's because their food's inadequate. I can tell you with this food, you don't have to do anything else except increase the food. And the reason it's suitable for all life stages, when you look at AFCO feeding profiles, puppies require more nutrition than adults, and older dogs require less nutrition than adults, etc. But that's when you're talking on minimums. AFCO gives you the minimum required. When you feed the optimum, the food, if it's designed to be the optimum food, it will suit all life stages. The reason these other foods make a puppy food is because their adult food's not good enough to feed a puppy. That's why they need a puppy food, because the adult food wouldn't sustain a growing puppy. So what they're really saying is we have different life stage products because we don't make good enough products. If they made a better product, they'd only need one. It also aids in their marketing. They can say to people, oh, we've got a puppy food and all these sorts of things. But at the end of the day, the quality of the food should be able to serve all life stages. The only thing you need to do is to alter the amount you feed. If you've got an older dog and you want to reduce its weight because he's getting fat, you just feed him less. But every piece of XP3020 has the same makeup in it. If it's meeting the energy requirement of the dog, it's balanced for its protein, it's balanced for its fat, it's balanced for its vitamins and minerals. It will meet all of the requirements of the dog if it's meeting its energy requirements. It also contains glucosamine and chondroitin. And the reason we put that in there is because it's great for joint health. Not just for the older dogs, not just to maintain and help them if they start to get arthritis as they get into their elderly years, but it's also very good for maintaining joint mobility. We've got fruit, berries and vegetables in there. They're not just in there as a marketing thing, because they provide quality antioxidants and they collect the free radicals in food, so they help in the body to keep the body healthy. So they're there for a reason. And we've got the correct amount of calcium and phosphorus and in the correct ratio. So we have the correct amounts and the correct ratio. And AFCO, if those of you who've got AFCO studies or want to do any research on it, there is I'll have to go and refer to my notes on this because I can never remember it off the top of my head. But interestingly, 99% of the body's calcium is found in the skeleton. So the body actually gets the calcium and puts it into the bones. 85% of the phosphorus is also found in combination with it. AFCO recommends a 1.2 to 1 up to a 1.4 to 1 requirement. And then it talks about the amounts that are required for growth, etc. And XP3020 meets those correct amounts, because if you put too much calcium in food, you can get calcium deposits and you can end up with all sorts of problems in your joints, particularly in the large growing breeds. You may have seen that, I don't know, over the years, whether you've had people who've got Great Danes or the long bone breeds. If you force their growth too quickly, if you oversupply with calcium, you can end up getting, not quite rickets, but you get sort of like an OCD in the wrist joints. So it's important that the calcium is not just in the correct ratio, but also in the correct amounts. And XP3020 is formulated to have that. Contains high quality chicken fat. I talked to you about dogs preferentially using fat for energy. If they don't have enough fat, the skin and coat suffers. Chicken fat's the best quality you can use. It's not cheap, but it's the best quality you can use. Low melting point, easily assimilated by the dog, easily digestible. So that's really a little bit about XP3020, and I didn't want to I could talk to you all night about the quality of the products.
Can I ask what are split ingredients?
Split ingredients?
Yes.
Split ingredients are... It's a pity I didn't bring one of the pet food bags. Split ingredients are where a manufacturer, as you're aware that in the list of ingredients they go in descending order. So the ingredient with the most amount in it is number one, and then they work down. There was a food that we saw today that had, I think it was chicken meal as its first ingredient. The second ingredient was potato, and the third ingredient was potato flour. Why do you think they split potato and potato flour? Because if you added them together, where do you reckon potato would be? Number one. Now, if someone came in and picked up the bag and says, oh, this has got potato as its first ingredient, the customer won't buy it. Why do you think they did it on the one that I showed, that example that I showed you on the feeding? They did it there. They wanted to get chicken to the top. So they dropped down the chicken meal and they put chicken because people think fresh chicken, oh, how good's that? God, it's got fresh chicken in it. Geez, my dog loves fresh chicken. Well, it's crap. What they did was they actually took meat protein out and stuck in corn gluten meal. And you see, look at that. I'll give you one product. I'm not here to bash other products, but I get so disappointed that having educated the market in Australia and having spent so much money trying to educate people about why and how you feed dogs better, I get so disappointed when I see some of these foods on the market that purport to be premium foods that are no longer premium foods. You go and have a look at adult food. It couldn't possibly have any more different carbohydrates in it. Corn gluten meal, it's got wheat flour, it's got sorghum, it's got maize, it's got... You can't believe it. There's about 6 or 7 cereal sources in it. Why are they in there? So they can put chicken up the front when there's hardly any in it. That's why... And it leads me to one of the other points about the rise in grain-free foods. And it seems to be a phenomenon. Do you know that there is no research to support grain-free? Absolutely no research whatsoever to support grain-free. It's never been done. There is nothing to say that grain-free is good or bad, but no one knows. But it's the most or the fastest growing category in pet food, and I'm surprised. I did a little note today. I just went through and had a look, and these are some of the things that are being used currently in grain-free. As I said, there's no data, no research to support grain-free diets. No one knows whether it's good, bad or indifferent. But they're using peas, green peas and chickpeas. They're using tapioca, which is basically starch, potato, sweet potato, lentils. Lentils have the second highest ratio of protein after soybean. And everyone knows if you have a look at any product, they're hooked on soybean. They call it vegetable protein concentrate, vegetable protein isolate. They have different names for it, but that's what it is. It's soybean. And interesting about soybean, does anyone remember when first came into the market, canned food first came into the market in Australia? Jesus, I must be old because I can remember it. Well, let me tell you about when canned food first came into the market. The canned food that was the best in the market was a product called Biff. I don't know whether anyone ever remembers that. But you opened a can of Biff and it was like a mush. Correct? Anyone remember it? It was like a mush. But you know why it was like a mush? Because that's what happens when you grind up meat. Do you know what I did? Got themselves some textured vegetable protein, a la soybean. They put some iron on it, which makes it turn red, rust. They bake it. They chopped it into little pieces. They stuck it in a horrible can of food and they said, with meaty chunks. And people thought that little red thing in the can was meat. It was soybean, and it still is. It's soybean. Yet they put Biff out of business through marketing. They made a shitty product and put Biff out of business, which was a much better food because it was more acceptable to the consumer. And you can be confident that they will see a difference in their dog. And you talk to people. If someone's happy with what they're feeding, I would never advise you to change them off that. I don't think that's a good move. But from time to time you'll get people who come into your store who are unhappy with how their dog's looking or what's happening with their dog at the moment. They're the people you say, well, look, try this. We've been told that this is the best food in the market. So try it for 6 weeks and see what you think. If you've got a dog yourself, try it for 6 weeks and see what you think. You will see a difference. So you can actually use the, if you like, the test of it. Let the people product test it. Test it for yourself. But take those people who are disenchanted with what they're doing at the moment, where their dog's not looking as good as it should. You don't necessarily have to give them a 40-minute spiel on why the product is better, but there's a couple of things you can take away. There's more meat in this. This is a meat-based protein food. It's got chicken fat, which is the best fat, and it has no cereal protein in it. Dogs do better on meat. That's why this food performs better. So, and I know it works because this is a food used by top greyhound trainers. The greyhound trainer Robert Britton, who's not only Victoria's top trainer, but he was announced Australia's top trainer. He's been feeding this product for about 3 years. And he's absolutely delighted with it. And greyhound trainers have the ability or the advantage over everyone else is that they see changes to their dogs far more quickly than the average pet owner. Because if the dog falls away in performance, they notice it straight away. They don't keep using the food just because, maybe there's some nice marketing hype around it. They use it because it actually gives them results. And the other side of it is that if people are happy with what they're doing, I never recommend them to change. I used to always say to them, if you're happy with what you're doing, don't change. Because no matter how good this food is, and it is a fantastic food, it will not suit 100% of dogs. That's just the way it is. So if someone's happy with what they're doing, the last thing you want to do as a pet professional is change them. Because remember we talked about expert knowledge and they rely on you? You don't want to be changing them. If they're happy, leave them happy. But not everyone's happy, I can tell you. You go and talk, if you take a poll of dog people about their dog and is it happy, does it look good, is it stools always correct, does it smell when it empties and does it, sit in the lounge room and farts all the time and drives everyone crazy? there's plenty of those dogs around because they're eating the wrong food. Look, dental health over the years, as I said, I've bred Bichons for 40 years, and over the years, ever since 1989 when we first brought her in, we feed dry food and only dry food, nothing else. We wean our puppies onto the food, and that's all they ever eat. And some dogs have better teeth than others. Some have cleaner teeth than others. It's one of those things that I don't know the answer to it. I think it's the makeup of the saliva in the mouth.
What about the size of the kibble?
Well, the kibble, being a dry food, you do get a little bit of abrasiveness when they chew on the kibble. But having said that, some dogs just suck it down anyway and they never chew. I always recommend, and I always have done, that if you want to maintain decent dental health, then you should give either the pig's ear or something like that, something for the dog to chew on. Those who'll chew nylon bones, they're very, very good. Not all of them will chew that, but they're very good when they will chew them. But pig's ears, generally most of them will chew those. And you can give a brisket bone. You've got to be careful with bones. It needs to be a bone that won't splinter or anything like that. Never encourage people to give cooked bones because they will splinter, and you can end up with getting problems in the intestines and whether you actually get food or not.
Is it rehydratable for puppies?
Look, what I do with our pups, and Bichons are only small pups, as you know, we soak it for the first probably 5 or 6 days, and the first few days we mash it up, and then after that you can either put it in a Vitamizer and mash it up and do that. Then after that we just soak it, but we don't mash it, and then after about a week or maybe 8 days we offer them wet and dry, and it doesn't take very long before they don't go to the wet one and they just eat it dry. It's really amazing because you'd think they'd prefer to have it wet, but they don't. Once you put down the two, we find that they gravitate to the dry food more easily than the wet food. So, but you can, it's rehydratable from that point of view, but it's a little bit of work because it's interesting. If you take this food and you put it in a bowl to soak, it'll take ages to soak, whereas the cereal-based foods soak down real quick and they become mash very instantly. This food takes ages. We can leave it overnight and it's still in its pieces the next morning, and Wendy whinges because then she has to mash it up. But that's because it's got more meat in it. No trouble eating it. And the interesting thing is that we've had a lot of people say about the bite size, because the bite size is not particularly big, even though it's too big for cats. And a lot of the big people said, or big dog people said, oh, it won't be any good for our greyhounds because the bite size is too small. I said, no, there'd be no problem whatsoever. We've not had any dogs from big to little that's had any problems with the bite size. It's the owners have more of a problem. They think they need... It doesn't make any difference. But they think because they've got a bigger dog, it needs a bigger kibble size. And see, that's something else that's been... But that's been something else that's been perpetuated by manufacturers, because they make a big bite size for big dogs and a little one for little dogs. So people think that. I'm saying from my experience, and I've raced and trained greyhounds over it. Yeah, I've raced and trained greyhounds over a number of years, and I've fed greyhounds straight on Eukanuba and straight on XP3020. I've had Bichons for 40 years, and during that time, obviously there wasn't premium food in the market for the first years we had them, but there has been since then. We've been feeding dry food and absolutely nothing for since 1989. So what's that? 99, 09. That's too bloody long to remember. 27 years. So.
Okay. Any further questions for John before we wind it up?
That was great.
Excellent.
Thank you.